Hello, hi. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Good, fantastic. Hello, hi. I'm Chiara Alfano. I'm the Associate Dean for Teaching and Learning here at Northeastern University London, and it's great to be here. Now let me try and figure out, sorry. Okay, all right. So for a while now, I have been joking with my team that whenever we have a TNL event, we shouldn't mention AI because then that's all we're going to keep talking about. It's not because I don't like talking about AI. I'm here after all, but it is that I sometimes find both internally and externally, sometimes the defensive tone of the conversation, I don't really think sets the right frame around the conversation we should be having. And when the conversation tends to AI proofing, and this might be both assessments as well as pedagogy more in general, I think that's a bit like thinking about, well, shall we just turn the clock back? I just don't think it is a very productive line of inquiry. No, AI is the elephant in the room, not because we don't talk about it. We actually do quite a lot. It's just that I feel that we don't talk about it comprehensively. We just talk about a part of it often. So perhaps, we just talk about the trunk, but not really about the rest of the elephant. So what I'm trying to do today is to at least try and trace out a bit more of AI and assessment. Right. So my argument in a nutshell is that the familiar refrain of AI proofing is a defensive posture that fundamentally misunderstands both a student's reality and today's educational mission. And instead, I'm arguing for a bold paradigm shift towards AI literacy as the cornerstone of 21st century pedagogy. Now, what do I mean by critical AI literacy? What I don't mean is that we should abandon all that we hold dear in our disciplines and education, and we should blindly embrace AI. That is not what I'm saying, actually, quite the opposite. In fact, it is very possible to be a very AI literate, conscientious AI objector. That can be absolutely true. But what I am saying is that we will have to engage with it, and that we will just have to acknowledge the fact that we are educating in a time that's happened after the 30th of November of 2022. Okay, so what do I mean by critical AI literacies? There are kind of 6 aspects to it. Part of that is having at least a fundamental or rudimentary understanding of the technology, understanding data, having a good grasp of data ethics. And, as the previous speaker said, questions around sustainability are very important. Being agile in terms of the context of use, what's okay in one context isn't okay in a different context. Being able to critically evaluate the output. And that's not only the output, but also critically evaluate our relationship to AI. When, are we dependent on it? When do we when am I tempted to ask Claude to do stuff for me rather than doing it myself? And then really important, embracing autonomy and agency of us as the users, of who are ultimately in charge of our use of AI. And all of this is kind of built on this concept of humanics that's been proposed by Joseph Aoun, who also happens to be the president of Northeastern University. And this is idea of about the integration of 3 literacies, so technological, data, and human, to prepare students to work alongside smart machines by developing uniquely human capabilities like creativity, critical thinking, and empathy. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to talk you through briefly a timeline of recent history of how faculty-facing AI guidance and training have evolved at Northeastern University London since November 22. So November 22 is obviously when ChatGPT dropped. The first AI task force started in spring 23. So task forces are a group of, think of it a bit as a town hall, but with a job to do. So we have students, we have faculty from all provisions, we have leadership, we have quality, we have academic staff, and they all come together to kind of try and help us think through a certain challenge or question. Now, the first AI task force really the focus here was finding our feet. We're just trying to figure out what the hell had just happened, basically, and how we're going to respond to it. The products of that, or the outcomes, were an AI strategy that's still in place today. But just, I think, because of how close it was to ChatGPT dropping, a lot of it was actually very defensive. So we created an AI literate assessment cheat sheet, which was basically about AI proofing assessment or trying to make them AI resilient. We worked with Registry and Quality to recognize misuse of AI as a special case of academic misconduct. And also based on that, we provided spotter training for faculty so that they could spot misuse of AI without being overly reliant on Turnitin, because we know that that can be very problematic. Now, in the second task force, which was a year later, it moved a bit more away from the kind of AI proofing to thinking about how do we make assessments AI resilient, and also how can we make assessments AI enhanced. Then in the third task force was basically very much asked for by our students, and this was trying to make our stance to AI institutionally clearer, but also making it much, much clearer in a much more uniform way in assessment briefs, what is allowed and what is not allowed and why. And then a big recent event that's happened is in April, Northeastern globally announced a collaboration with Anthropic, which means that Claude for Education is now available for free to all faculty, students, and staff. And then guidance that was then provided after, both here in London and in Boston, basically built on that, and the focus was much more on critical AI literacies. And I keep on referring to Boston because we are both a UK university, but we're also part of the big global university, Northeastern. So whilst this was all happening in London, at the same time, there's fantastic work happening in Boston. And we're really lucky as an institution that despite our small size, we can really draw on the expertise of this big institution that we belong to. And they really developed what I believe is really leading AI TNL ecosystems, amazing resources, training, guidance, AI gallery. We have AI TNL fellows, so it's really fantastic for us to be able to draw on that. Now, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to resist slightly this idea of this linear picture of progression from a defensive stance to a more kind of engaged stance. And as you can see here, there's no real correlation between the time passed since ChatGPT dropped and the progressiveness. So for instance, if you look at the AI strategy, that's the second thing we created that is very balanced. It both has defensive elements and more kind of engaged elements. And part of that is, as you know, the previous speaker said, I think assessment and pedagogical cultures don't just shift overnight, it takes time. And we are quite reactive as well as proactive as a team. We often listen to faculty and say, what is it that you need, right? So if you see that then here, for instance, the spotting tips, that those were published almost a year after the AI strategy, but it's quite defensive in stance. And I think the main reason for why that is that I think when we think about AI and assessment, progression isn't the whole story. I think it is about positioning. And depending on the context, the stance will have to be adjusted. And this is, I think, shown very clearly in our AI policy that's openly available. And it talks in the first sentence, it talks about both the ready promise and the uncertain impacts of AI. And I think balancing the two, any AI assessment strategy will have to balance of the two. And I think that this balancing act is ultimately what, at an institutional level, AI literacy is about. Now, what do I then think might the AI literate assessment diets of the future look like? So there is, I hear narratives often that will mean that we'll just return to old school exams. That's the only way that we can handle this. I personally don't think that that's what the future will hold. I think because we need assessment cultures that are embedded in the 6 facets of critical AI literacy, we will have to build them. And I think that our assessments of the future are going to have four kind of aspects. You're going to have AI-proof assessments, so closed book exams, for instance. You're going to have AI-resilient assessments. So these are assessments that, because they are good assessments, they kind of almost design out an irresponsible use of AI. Just because if you used AI to do it, you wouldn't do a good job. Then we're going to have AI-enhanced assessments. So these are assessments that ask the student to really work responsibly with AI, but we'll have to do that, respecting student agency and also the contextual exigencies of the discipline and the learning outcomes at hand. But then I think one of the big things I think we're going to see a shift to is experiential assessment, because it is, I think, represents best this balancing act of AI literacy. Experience, particularly when live, is AI proof, and if based on real world scenarios, it will integrate AI in authentic ways. But also experience is naturally intrinsically human. And I'm almost done. I'm sorry, I realize I'm slightly bit over. So just finally, my last slide. So I think the AI literate pedagogies of tomorrow are not going to be less but more human. I think we're going to have to reconsider the learning outcomes. We'll have to rethink the knowledge and skills section and focus much more on the human competencies and literacies in the transferable skills section. We're going to have to think really carefully about how we scaffold critical AI literacies across programs so that we don't ask students to do the same thing over and over again. We'll have to communicate and transmit our values. And this is really important. Like we have to kind of come to terms with the fact that we are not going to be able to prepare students for all possible AI uses that they will ever encounter. That is not what our job is. I think our job is just to give them a really good critical base and some agility so that they have everything that they need to engage responsibly with AI. And then finally, I think that we as a sector, I think we also really have to realize the power that we have here. We don't only respond to this context, but because we're in the business of education, we also really have big power to shape this context in the future. Thank you, and sorry for running over there.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Chiara. That was a great talk. It really was very informative. We've had some great questions in the Q&A, but we've only got about 1.5 minutes, so we'll see how we get on. We've had a couple of questions, actually, all kind of on a similar theme, so maybe I'll summarize some of them, if that's okay. Are you doing anything at Northeastern around the environmental kind of cost or the environmental impact in terms of awareness, any training that you're offering students or staff? Are you tackling any of that yet at Northeastern?
We are, so we have sustainability is one of our big things that we try and do. And I think that is definitely, so we are very big on AI ethics here. That's also as actually like a discipline, and that is really part of it. One of the things that we're currently working on, we're working on a student-facing animation that explains our approach to AI, and I think that element is going to be part of that. And also we really encourage faculty to the conversation of why we use AI, when we use it, and why we sometimes don't use it. I think the sustainability part needs to be, I think, really interwoven into almost every conversation that we have about it. Yeah.